and welcome to Jigsaw Shed. So for this project I decided to try something different with my texturing, a technique that I picked up at the Chestnut Products Woodturning Weekender as demonstrated by Chris Parker. However, we will get to that in a bit. First I had to get the medium sorted, so I chucked a piece of ash onto the lathe, well, more carefully placed rather than chucked, but you get the drift, and set out to rough turning it. Well, like with most of my bowls, when I start I don't know the shape that I'm going to go for. I mainly let the wood dictate. As this is wood I've seasoned myself, so there are cracks and deformities, so I sort of have to see where I need to work them away, or can I stabilize them. And yeah, it's as I enjoy the turning, I then slowly form the shape itself. So there was a lot more to cut away than I initially intended, but yeah, you will slowly see this shape taking form. And obviously for the rough turning I'm using my half-inch bowl gouge with the extra long handle, just nice and stable, and just works away really nicely at this piece. And although it wasn't a completely round piece when I started, with me having put it on lathe, it was fairly balanced, so I actually managed to turn it at the higher speeds from the offset than I would normally do, without the workshop rattling. Yeah, with this bowl I had to take away a lot more of the wood than I initially thought, but hey, that's how it goes. As I'm going to finish it outside of the bowl first, I just cut away into the lip just so that the finish can be done nicely on the outside, and then I can work with what I've got on the top later. But it also gives an idea of how the top will look like at the end for me. So on to marking out the mortise for the bowl. Now I'm using my calipers here, and they do have sharp points. Obviously I want to make that mark into the bowl, but I really have to make sure that both ends do not touch at the same time, as that could be dangerous. So yeah, you just need to be really careful with that. Now you will see in a bit I've had to cut a bit deeper as I was changing the shape here just a little bit more. Again, I wasn't happy, and then going in this reassessing that a bit, find that it wasn't deep enough. So yeah, just going back in there again, but all good. And then on to sanding. Now again, I'm not going to keep you here long, but I worked my way up the grits, up to 400 grit, and using both hand sanding and the drill. And then there were a few punky bits, so I decided I'm going to get out the O3 adhesives thin and start sealing those in, but then just decided I'll just cover the whole bowl, make sure everything is covered, and then it means sanding is a bit more even as well across the different grains. Now it looks like the drill was standing still there, but just where I've sped it up it was actually moving, but obviously the speeding up and the revolutions of the drill gave that illusion. And then obviously just sealing it now with cellulose sanding sealer before, yeah, and then de-nibbing it with the Chestnut Products Nye Web. And then just decided to buff it out with its own shavings, and that actually gave a nice shine, ready for some Yorkshire grit. And then I move on to the microcrystalline wax, as I want to give it a decent protective covering as well. And then just polishing it up. Now when I came to flip the bowl over, I realised I'd mismeasured, and I'd measured for a tenon size rather than a mortise size. I really need to get myself some quick templates out for these things, obviously as the size is always the same. So it did mean I had to recut that, but then it meant I could clean that area up again, and it allowed for me to engrave my logo with a laser at the end, which you'll see. But yeah, so moving on to the front now. Obviously, I've started the curve on the top. I didn't want to make the top flat. I did like the curve effect, as then you can see more aspects the bowl, rather than just having to look from the top to see the effect. So having marked out where I want the bowl part to go, I then mark out my bands of texture, and then I move on to the new technique I picked up from Chris Parker at the Chestnut Products Woodturning Weekender, and it is to use a Dremel engraver with a blunt bit. So there's somewhere a reel out where I show how I've blunted the bit itself, and that was to use my Dremel A260. However, this punches into the grain, so the soft and hard grain of the ash works really well, and it gives a really nice subtle texture to the piece itself. And then moving on to the Dremel A260 with the 114 bit, and I've just carved these little dimples onto the inner ring. Now there was a couple of bits where it did go over the line that I wasn't too happy with, but overall the effect worked in the end. And then for a final band of texture, I'm using my Simon Hope mini texturing tool. So then on to using the Dremel abrasive buffing wheel to denip the texture, and then I used cellulose sanding sealer. Now the wipe-on sealer didn't go so well into the texture, so I resorted to using the aerosolized cellulose sanding sealer, and that worked well. And then covered the whole piece in ebonizing lacquer. The ebonizing lacquer was applied in thin coats on a number of applications, rather than putting a whole load on there. And then, because it was overspray, I could wipe it away as the back surface was wax. It was a little bit harder, and I thought, as I'm going to use more paint and lacquer after it, I'll just put a coat of wax on again that I can buff out later. So using rainbow waxes, and then I used the Jo Sonja's Flow Medium just to make it a bit more easy to apply. And initially I was going to do it in bands of color, and then decided, nah, just cover the whole thing blue and work from there. Now this did take quite a while to do, and a fair amount of the Chestnut Products rainbow wax. Now although this is a wax, it dries like a paint and isn't waxy at all, so it can be finished with lacquer over the top, as you will see me doing later. So there were a few voids in this bowl. As you can see there's a knot there that had this void, and there's a line somewhere that's a worm line, but I thought I'll keep them in as part of the texture. Then I moved on to the green rainbow wax, but this time, rather than covering the whole piece, I've used the Flow Medium, but then brushed most of it off the brush to do more of a dry brushing technique. Took a lot of dabbing and everything to start showing it through, but I needed the green just to be more subtle, more on the surface, rather than covering it deeper into the grooves. So I wanted to add a bit more to the piece, so I decided to do dry brushing with the purple wax as well. This time didn't use the Jo Sonja's, just a little bit of a dab, so that was even less visible, but it does show up nicely in the light as well. So once the rainbow wax has dried, I could seal it with sanding sealer again, and now just adding a couple of lines to band the two different textures, and you will see on the inner band where the dimple had gone over, it just fed across the line, but that's fine. And then just to the hollowing. Now I used the parting tool to cut the line first, because I really did not want to skate across the piece and damage all the texture I've done. So you will see there's a knot there, which gave the void the other side, and this one I decided I was going to fill in, so I sealed it with the thin CA glue, and then all the punkiness inside the bowl as well. I thought I'll cover that all. And then black thick CA glue to fill it in, a couple of layers of that, and then just scrape away the glue that I had put in there. And this actually gave a really nice finish in the end, after some sanding again, but again won't keep you with the sanding. So there was a bit of dust to brush off before moving on to applying cellular sanding sealer to the inside, and once that occurred I was able to buff it up with its own shavings again before moving on to acrylic gloss lacquer from Chestnut Products. And I lost count of how many coats of this I've done, but I want to say it's around about 4 to 6 coats, but all very fine sprays at a time, nothing where it would run. But making sure I get into all the texture itself as well. And then just denibbing in between coats as well. Now onto the Yorkshire grit to polish up the inside. Normally I would go to microfine as well, but this time I had just stuck with the original, and that had given enough of a shine up on the inside on the lacquer. And then obviously final finish using the microcrystalline wax again. Now there was some overspill from the rainbow wax over the lip of the bowl, but also some overspray from the lacquer. However, as the back was a wax finish, it just buffed up nicely and cleaned all of that away. I then moved on to engraving my logo with the Sculpt Fun 10-watt laser. It did 2 passes to get the logo to set, but it came out a lot better than my previous attempts on ash. I think the grain was fairly well spread at the back there, and then just a quick finish on the back with some sealer and wax. Well, thank you for joining me in Jigsaw Shed. Now I had a lot of fun with this piece, playing around with the texture and the colouring. And obviously the dry brushing just helped to reveal the texture itself, and it was great to be able to use my Dremel engraver in a different way. So I've got to thank Chris Parker demonstrating that at the Chestnut Products Woodturning Weekender. If you haven't been to the Woodturning Weekender and you're in the UK, do look at the dates for next year, and if you can come along, it's a great event and loads of great demos and new skills to be learned. And this time it will be back at the Steam Museum in Swindon. Really great venue in between the old locomotives and everything. But yeah, I then obviously had my logo engraved on the back as well with the Sculpt Fun laser, and this time it came a lot better. I think the grain in the back there is it's spread a bit wider, just because of how I've turned it. But yeah, worked much better on this piece of ash. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Leave me a comment down below. And remember to subscribe to my channel if you've not done so yet. And I hope to see you next time. Take care.